Okay, would you state your name for us, please?
The what, ma'am?
Would you state your name for us, please?
I'm Pat William Almond.
Okay, Mr. Almond. Mr. Almond, where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was shooting quail on the family farm. I came home. My daddy told me that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. I said, "Where is Pearl Harbor?" I had never heard of the place.
And did that make you want to join the military, or?
Not at that time. I wanted to get some facts. I didn't know anything about it. You know, it came out of the clear, and so it was a couple of days after reading the newspapers and all that I wanted to join up, but I was working, and they said wait a while and see how things settle out. I like everybody else, thought we'd whip the Japanese in 30 days, but turned out that was not the way that things worked.
And what branch of the service did you join?
I joined the Marines. And I was recruited by the Seabees, and they wanted as a chief carpenter's mate. And I went in to join up at Shreveport, and they told me they'd filled the quota. So I showed them. I went next door and joined the Marines.
There you go. And where'd you go?
From Marines, I was sent to San Diego boot camp.
And then you were shipped out?
No, at boot camp, various units would come and interview you, whether you wanted to go in the artillery, what you desired, whether you wanted to be a machine gunner, artilleryman, cook, bakers. But then Colonel James Roosevelt came in and talked to us. He was looking for volunteers for a Marine Raider unit. And he explained that your chances of getting injured was very high, but your chances of getting a shot at the Jap was very good. And he bought, I'd say, at least 100 men volunteer, and he chose, I think, 9 out of the 100. And I was one of the ones that he chose. And we went to Raider camp, which was in the boondocks at Camp Pendleton. A very rude, rugged camp. We had one faucet sticking up out of the ground for a shower for 1,000 men. And I didn't know water that cold could run through a pipe. And of course we had no floors, we had no electricity. We had no mess hall, cooked in the open. And Jimmy Roosevelt, meeting him like you and I are talking, he was Jimmy. In uniform, he was the colonel. And his tent was very different from mine, being the son of the President of the United States and a colonel in the Marine Corps. He had a Coleman lantern. That was the only difference in his tent and mine. And there was no sign on his tent saying commanding officer. And we had no officers' mess. Everybody ate the same mess, chow, and so forth. It was he was breaking us into what we was going to have in the islands. But we were well trained.
And then they told you they were sending you to the South Pacific?
Yes, that was a certainty. We was going to the South Pacific. That's where the Japs were. That's where the war was.
And you want to tell us about what happened to you down there, or your trip down there?
Well, we went over on the luxury line of President Polk. It was so luxurious, the bathroom facilities were built over the side of the ship. And the bread turned green. The water was severely rationed to a quart a day. And we were, as I say, quite crowded. But when we got over to our destination, which is island Espiritu Santos in the St. Pathas group, the ship's crew, Merchant Marines, went on strike. They wanted double pay. They had already lorded over us. They were making $3,000 for that trip. Of course, we were making 50. But then they wanted double pay for being in the danger zone. And all the while I was on that island, I saw 2 Jap planes, and they came over in a hurry. But we had to unload the ship ourselves, which we did, and we set up camp there. That was the island that was figured in the movie story South Pacific. And I knew the Frenchman quite well. Benoit was his name. He had 4 or 5 wives and a whole bunch of children. They looked like a North Louisiana sharecroppers chickens, you know, all shades. And very polite, extremely polite. But he was the featured man in the Tales of the South Pacific there. But we did further training there in the jungles, and it was extremely malarial. One of the most malarial islands it was. And they said white people couldn't live there, but he did for some time. He had ran a coconut plantation. The only wheeled vehicle on the island was an old Chevrolet truck. And it pulled a little trailer. It was the only wheels on the whole island. But they say the natives had a vocabulary of about 90 words. They had nothing much to talk about.
So you just trained there, and then you went on somewhere else?
We trained there in the jungle, and from there we attacked the islands north of Guadalcanal. We moved to Guadalcanal, but I never fired a shot on Guadalcanal. We did a lot of patrolling. All we found was skeletons. And we were amazed the first time we came across a group of Jap skeletons. Most of them were shot in the head. We said, gee, what wonderful shots the first raiders were. Then we found out that was the medical attention they gave the wounded Japs, put them out of their misery. We did not take prisoners. I have never seen a Jap attempted to surrender. The only Jap prisoners I saw was 10 the Army picked up on Guam. And I saw 1 on Okinawa. Yeah, I did see 1 at Guadalcanal. Aviator they picked up out of the water. Prisoners were mighty scarce. And you certainly did not want to be a prisoner of the Japanese. But,
so, and then after Guadalcanal, where did y'all go?
We went we worked on the islands north there, Guadalupe, Vancouver, Barroco, New Georgia, Coloman, and a whole bunch of smaller islands. The Navy would come in and say that they were fired on from such an island, or we'd go and take care of the shooters. And the Japs had coast watches, as we did. And we'd find out where a coast watcher was. We'd go take care of him on his radio. But that was quite an area. We'd land by torpedo boats, or we had our own ships. We had 4 World War II destroyers attached to us. They had pulled 2 boilers out of the ships to make room, and they called them fast transport. It was fast in comparison to the rubber boats we use sometimes, but not according to normal. It was a little bit faster than the destroyers we used, but not much. They were very rusty, so forth. But none of them survived the New Georgia campaign. They all were sunk. And PT boats, I was there when Kennedy pulled his boo-boo.
Really?
And we could never understand why they didn't keep him in the brig. He was confined to quarters, which is the officer's brig. And then 3 days later, they got word to ship him out. and they sent him back to the station. He became a hero when he should have, which he certainly didn't deserve. Can you imagine a Model T Ford running over a Thunderbird? But that's exactly about what happened. His vessel was twice as fast as the vehicle that run over him. So he was out where he wasn't supposed to be, and he got run over. And we had to go look for the rascal. But anyhow, we did not find him. Some other people found him.
So you were you in a hand-to-hand combat with the enemy?
I got a bayonet cut on the leg at Guam. And I was in a slugging match at Okinawa. And I burned my hands on my hot rifle barrel. But that's as close as I got.
And what stands out in your head the most about the Japanese soldiers? What do you most remember about them? Does anything stand out about them?
I mean, they stunk like hell when they were dead. Yeah, they were very tenacious. If properly trained, they would be very tough to defeat. But we loved the Banzai attacks, and they quit that after Guam. And then they went into set defense. And they were very tough. Mm-hmm. They did not fear death whatsoever. A death for the emperor was the greatest happening that could be happened for him. But I was in a unit that we were credited with killing more Japs than anyone else. In fact, my unit, my battalion, was chosen because of his record to be the first troops to set foot on Japan. Wow. And I missed it. I was in the hospital in Maryland, California, and I missed it. Mm. Out of my battalion, there were 27 of the original men who set foot on Japan. Wow. All the rest was shot up or killed.
And what unit were you with?
I was with the 4th Marine Raider Battalion.
Okay. And I know you spent a lot of time in the islands. You want to tell us some stories about in the islands and what the islanders thought about the Japanese? And
the island of Guam, we enjoyed that campaign greatly because we admired the people so. And there were 27,000 people on the island, not one we know that went pro-Japanese. And they were punished severely by the second day we were there. Natives told us that there was a concentration camp at Talafofo Bay on the far side of the island from us that the Japs had, and they had beheaded some people. And we double-timed over there. We caught the Jap garrison at dinner. They didn't finish their meal. And that afternoon, late, 2 Japs came down the trail, and I removed them from the rolls. And a native gave me a machete that he had, which is the only thing he had in the world. He was so pleased to get rid of these 2 obnoxious people. I used it this past weekend. I use it constantly. It's the finest knife I've ever owned in my life. I use it, and I really cherish it. I wouldn't. My Raider knife, issued by Jimmy Roosevelt, I sold this spring, last fall, I believe, probably in November. I sold it to a museum for $2,300. And I've had it all these years. Thought by it going into the American Heritage Museum, it would be there forevermore. People can see it, and I would have given it to him, I guess, but he come up and offered me the $2,300, and I took it. I am glad that it has.
Anything else you want to share with us? You can talk about anything you'd like to. Want to tell us any stories about when you said they had a concentration camp on that island?
That was on Guam.
On Guam, and what kind of prisoners were in the concentration camp?
They had mostly women and children.
Oh,
The Japanese, every Monday morning, according to the leader of this group there, the people, they would requisition so many women, so many gallons of milk, so many eggs, and so forth. And anybody that said anything bad, showed any disrespect, they beheaded them. And as you probably know, if you're familiar with the rape of Nanking by the Japanese, they had contests to see who could cut off the most heads in an hour with their sabers. And actually, we greatly appreciated their attachment to the sabers. One thing, a 30-06 will reach a lot farther than a saber. But those people were so generous and kind. We went on a little patrol there. One man knew that where there was some Japs at a farmhouse. And we crawled up to the farmhouse and the rifle cracked. It was from a 37 model Plymouth there. And of course we were a little Plymouth in the house. And shooting died down. Checked out. I asked the Guamanian, who owned this Plymouth? He said, me. And we had shot up his beautiful blue Plymouth there, but he was very happy to get rid of the Japs. But the Japs were extremely brutal. In Okinawa, I was involved 3 times in Japs hurting 25 to 35 women and children and marching them into our lines at night, and they'd be behind them with the demolition packs. It worked the first night, and you get 20 pounds of explosive in your lap, it's uncomfortable. And but our planes dropped thousands and thousands of leaflets telling the native people do not move at night. But the Japs would come in, they would have kimonos on. It came down to here, and their rifle sticking up here, and they split-toed shoes. But the Japs cared nothing for the civilians. In fact, there were as many civilians killed on Okinawa as there were Japanese troops. I think the last Jap soldier I tangled with was a conscripted Okinawan, because I think that I would not have won out had he been a trained soldier. But I have no use for the Japanese today. They have not changed. You cannot change 4,000 years. It was a religion to them. You cannot change that in 60 years.
Do you have any, do you have a best memory of the war?
What kind of?
A good memory, a best memory of the war?
I met the finest men that's ever lived. We get together and twice a year, and we're like closer than brothers, actually.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we are honored. We were honored by the Marine Corps year before last now, and they did their sunset program for us, and of course we sat in honored seats. And when we left to leave, it's about 150 yards to our vehicle, every 6 feet on either side of the sidewalk. A Marine in full dress.
Where was that held at?
We have had a museum in Richmond, Virginia, and we have moved it to Quantico now.
Wow.
We have a bunch of job stuff there. And my unit made quite a difference. They were $8,300. Here in Baton Rouge, I have personally found 3 men claiming to be Raiders that were not.
Oh. That's a shame.
And one of them committed suicide. But one ran a business here and one was a gun salesman. But we have that problem of men trying to claim to be Raiders that were not, and I'm sure they're doing that in the other thing. I never traveled on a submarine, but I trained on one. And I'll say this, I never learned to flush the toilet. In fact, it's so difficult. And it got to be such that they skip a station, the man there to flush the toilet. Trust you can imagine the submarine being down with that tremendous pressure on the side. To have to force something out, you know, it gets kind of complicated. But I never traveled on it, just trained on it. And we took all the paratrooper training except jumping out of planes. We never jumped out of planes. If the Marine Corps realized they didn't have the planes, transport planes. In my unit, we never had vehicles, we walked.
Wow.
And at Okinawa, we finished our job at the north end of the island. We came back to wait a ship. We was going back to Guam, the train to land in Japan. I never saw as many vehicles in my life as the Army had stored there. I don't know whatever happened to them, but we always walked everywhere we went. Of course, there were no roads in the jungles. The vehicles were totally useless. But they had them there. And when the Army took control of Guadalcanal, it became almost impossible to live there. They had so many rules and regulations, and we were very happy to leave.
Did you have was there a lot of Southern guys with you? Was a lot of Southern boys?
A lot of what, ma'am?
Southern boys in your unit?
Just about all.
I was gonna say, because it seems like the hunting, the fishing, the knowing how to stalk a prey and stuff, probably, you know, the type of missions and stuff that you guys had. That's what it kind of reminds me of. It reminds me of.
When the colonel was picking the men for his unit, he did not want softies. He wanted men who had worked and so forth. And he did have some, because every unit has to have a typist, you know, and some specialists. But mostly were all Southern boys. And Jimmy was, I guess, a great motivator, I guess you would call it. He could talk to us 5 minutes and convince us we could break a brick wall head first. I remember one night we had hiked 27 miles and were attacked 3 times by, this was training, and we attacked 3 times, and the only way our attack was physical. We couldn't use rifle butts, but we could use fists, knees, and feet. And we got within a couple of miles of camp. He said, "Suck around, men." He said, "You men are not tired. You just think you're tired. I'm going to show you you are not tired. Follow me." And he took out on a run and ran the last 2 miles. But that was Jimmy. I never had a furlough while I was in the Marine Corps. All I ever had was a 48 weekend pass. I had 4 of those before we went overseas. And the colonel had always put a note in his camp where he would be if anybody got in trouble. Like drinking too much or beating up a swabby or something. And an amazing thing, it wouldn't work today, but it worked beautiful then. Los Angeles was taken over by zoot suiters. They called themselves, they were Mexican, that they had they had a cross tattooed inside there. And if they'd catch a serviceman out somewhere single, they would really beat him up. They beat up policemen. They couldn't handle them. So someone had an idea. So they sent 2 of our companies in one weekend. The next weekend, the other 2 companies. That took care of the problem. Very simple, very easy. I'm sorry, I can't call the name what they call themselves, but they wore chains down to here, long coat, and they had a cult there. Sorry, the name just escapes at the moment. But I had the finest officers you'll ever see. They mostly came from the ranks. But Colonel Carson did not get what he really deserved because he didn't belong to the clique. He was a friend of the president and that bank. And Red Mike Edson, he really was the one who planned and ran the Battle of Guadalcanal. Of course, Van der Griff was in charge. He got all the credit. And at Okinawa, we were so poorly led. The battle was terrible. That 90% of the casualties could have been avoided had they used someone who knew how to fight the Japanese, but they didn't. And it was a waste, a great waste of mankind and assets. But it was a pretty good war, I guess. The best one we had. I remember Bill sailing. Bill was shot up twice. And he was very lucky. He always got shot up the first day and evacuated. But Bill joined up with the Korean War. He went down and he signed up. And some of them asked Bill, "Bill, why did you sign up for Korea?" He said, "Well," he said, "that's the only war we got going." And I went in to sign up. I handed the recruiting sergeant my discharge. He looked at it, turned to look to the other side, and "Get out of here." He didn't want me at all. But I spent 3 months in the hospital in Maryland in the war, and I was discharged. They fired me.
You were wounded in battle?
Yes, I was beat up a little at Guam and again at Okinawa. In fact, at Guam, I just got the bayonet cut and some concussion. But Okinawa, I got a bullet through the corner of the head. They blinded the eye and busted the ear. Other than that, I came out in pretty good shape. I was flown to the States. And I spent 3 months in the hospital there. And I guess the greatest problem I had was anemic dysentery and malaria and a few other assorted things.
When did you go home and see your family?
Ma'am?
When did you go home and see your family?
I was gone exactly 3 years. And during the 3 years, the only time I was ever in a place with a floor was when I was hospitalized.
Wow.
Never had a floor, or electric light, a screened cookhouse. None of those things that they must. We had no refrigeration. And we did have a lot of outdoor living. And we were wonderfully trained troops. I mean, our shooting ability was far above normal, and our use of weapons was fun. We could carry the weapon of choice, by the way. There was no, you could take whatever you wanted, whatever you felt comfortable with, what you carried.
What did you take?
I took a Browning automatic rifle. It weighed 16.5 pounds and would shoot up to 400 rounds a minute. But you have to conserve ammunition. It was full or semi-automatic. It was a wonderful weapon. The Marine Corps and the Armed Forces has done away with it. They no longer use it. They say it's too heavy for the present-day troops to carry. But we had about at least 4 out of 10 carried the Browning automatic. And we had, you know David Couillon, I'm sure.
Yes.
David made the colonel, Bull Colonel, he made a speech to us about 6 weeks ago, telling us that the troops in Iraq had the best weapons available. And after it's over, I told him, I said, David, I didn't want to embarrass you in front of all those people, but you talked a bunch of bull. Huh? I said, I've seen your newsreels, I read the papers, I have not seen the picture of one BAR. I said, remember this, we never lost a war when we were equipped with BARs. Since we got rid of the BARs, nothing, you know, bad news. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'd go with the M14, which is almost like a BAR. Used to be BAR magazine, semi-automatic, 20 rounds. But anyhow, we loved the BAR. In fact, I would have married mine if he could have cooked. But we loved our weapons, and we were very good with them.
Is there anything you can talk about? Anything else? Is there anything else you want to share with us, or?
The awarding of medals, we did not like at all. If a Jap threw a grenade into your hole and you pitched your body over it, you get a Congressional Medal of Honor. We picked them up and threw them back.
Really?
So 2 or 3 men got their hands blown off by it, but I think picking them up and throwing them back is a whole lot more effective. And seniority killed about as many men as the Jap Nambu, I think. Seniority is the worst thing that ever happened. Just because somebody's been in service a day longer than somebody else should not qualify him to run a campaign. He's the qualified man. The biggest naval loss since Pearl Harbor happened the first night at Guadalcanal. The man in charge of the naval ships secured quarters at 5 o'clock. He just worked from 8 to 5. They all went to sleep. They had 3 reports that the Jap fleet was in the area. That night, we lost 4 cruisers that we could not afford to lose. The Japs came in. Not a Jap ship was scratched. Another time, the Japs slipped in with 3 destroyers and sank 2 more ships. Well, of course, the admiral in charge had a couple of days seniority over somebody else, which did not mean he could. And the admiral in charge, Admiral Gorhamley, was an ambassador. He was in England. He was in charge of naval affairs in England. And because they had seniority, they sent him to the Pacific to be in charge of things. And they had to remove him. And they put Nimitz in there. And Halsey actually removed Gorhamley to put Nimitz over the entire Pacific. But Bull Halsey, and don't call him that, by the way, if you run into him, of course he's dead now, he didn't like that. But he had a big sign on it, kill Japs, kill Japs, kill Japs. And remember one time he got in the Battle of the Philippines, they sent him word that this Jap fleet had been reported such a place. He said, attacked, attacked, attacked. And yes, it's amazing that we lost so many people and so much equipment due to seniority. But that's the way it works.
Yeah.
Well,
You have some things here you want to
yeah.
tell us about that? Especially that flag.
This is the emblem of the Marine Raiders. And we have been told by high-ranking Marines that we are the only unit entitled to use the death's head. And the stars represent the Southern Cross. And in the long way, points due north, they use the top star there as we use the North Star here. That's what they use in something. And this is drawn. It's my last fight, and the original of it is in our museum, and that was my last fight. And
Is that Okinawa?
Okinawa Shima. But the largest building at the Quantico base is named after my unit.
Really?
The largest building, the San Diego area, is named after my unit. Wow. There has been 34 ships, naval combat ships, named after my unit, Raiders. The largest ship the Navy has is commissioned over in Mississippi right now, is named after my unit, the largest one. And as I say, we only had 8,300 men, so that's pretty good. The greatest majority of medals hanging passed out in the campaign, particularly Purple Hearts, under my unit. In fact, that we only know of one man in our battalion that did not get at least one Purple Heart. Some got several. No, one man had 7. Kind of cuckoo. He's been kind of in bad shape ever since the war. I don't think he's living today. But we were a close-knit group. The regular Marines were not allowed in our camp.
Really?
At Guadalcanal and so forth, because we had ammunition stacked up, and we could not eat. You could go to the mess area with your skillet, but unless you had your rifle, you didn't get fed. That rifle was with us constantly. You went to wash your clothes, you had your rifle and ammunition. The other Marines didn't do that. They had to draw ammunition for something. But we had a hurry call, and we washed our clothes in the river, almost a half a mile from the camp. And we had a hurry call. We were moving out, and got severely lambasted because my company took us 29 minutes to get to the beach, loaded, ready to go. But we had a 14-day supply of food sitting on the beach, food and ammunition, and we had all had our personal food and ammunition. And you better not be caught without a full unit of ammunition or 3 days' food in your pack. That is not much food, I assure you, because we ate 2 meals a day. And sometimes went as long as 3 days on a campaign without food. And our men that were wounded in Morocco, it was 9 days before they saw a doctor. They were loaded aboard a PBY, which came in to evacuate them. As the PBY was taken off, a Zero shot it down. And only the co-pilot was killed. And but it was 9 days before they saw a doctor. But it's amazing that our cuts and bruises healed.
Really?
And we had sulfur drugs, which they do not use today. But we healed up fast. It just about had to. Well, we were all infected with sores, skin diseases, and so forth. You know. As I say, the jungle doesn't like Caucasians. But we liked the natives. They were good.
We're glad to see y'all when y'all got there, huh?
No, we messed up their lives, but then the Japs had done so much damage to them that they would have to see. Yeah, they some spoke pidgin English. There's a lot of missionaries there. Sister Mary, she died last year. She spent 50 years in Guadalcanal. She was a wonderful, nice lady. And the Japs killed 4 priests, but they did not kill her. And priest had laid the bodies out under the cross, but we liked Sister Mary Teresa. She was very nice. She made 2 of our conventions.
Oh, she did.
And we could send her money. She preferred stamps. She said, if you send me money, then Mother Superior takes. So she preferred stamps. So.
Well, Mr. Pat, I certainly appreciate you coming out and sharing your experience with us. And I want you to know that we all appreciate your service to our country. And I think that your generation is the greatest generation. And so clear to me.
I was well paid for my services at $50 a month.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah, I get pretty fair treatment at the Veterans Administration Hospital, and a few bucks, little beer money every month, and then enough to buy my shells and bullets.
Still hunt?
Oh yes,
still
I still hunt. I don't shoot much. I shot so many deer that I'd rather watch them than shoot them now. But I do hunt. I like to work in the woods, fun. But